Hello, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Ariel Molino. I'm the Chief Convener with Pollinate Impact, and I am joining today from Nairobi. Pollinate Impact is a member-led network of impact incubators across the global South. And one of the biggest challenges and issues that we are working to tackle with Pollinate Impact is the funding and sustainability and the financial aspect of keeping the lights on for incubators and accelerators. And every month we do some sort of engagement with donors in the ecosystem. So today's session is our Ask Me Anything, and we are very lucky today to have with us Maggie Flanagan with the Lemelson Foundation and David Higgins from Johnson & Johnson Impact Ventures, who are going to give their perspectives to some of the questions that came in from the registration form, but we'll open it up to you all to ask your questions as well. So welcome you to add your questions in the chat that you want to answer. If you want to put your hand up, happy to sort of let you ask your question. And before we dig in, if you've joined us in any of our other sessions at Pollinate Impact, we always start with a check-in question, so I won't take too much time. But you can just follow the link. Thank you, Tessie. My colleague has put the Menti link in the chat there. We want to know what's one strategy you use to build relationships with funders or donors. So just feel free to put that in the chat. We're curious how you all do this so far, and curious to hear. It could be a word, a phrase. Oh, building trust. I love that. I think that's definitely really key. Let's see if we can get a few more answers in. So if you're just joining, please click on the Menti link that's there in the chat. We want to know what strategy you all use when you're building relationships with funders or donors. So finding alignment, that's something that we've heard a lot in our previous sessions about how, how you can really align expectations and align impact and motivations with the donors that you're looking for. Impact stewardship newsletters, very practical. I like that. Trust, fantastic. Empathy, a lot of kind of softer things here. Sharing impact reports, great. So we're seeing quite a bit about impact, highlighting impact, sharing the impact reports, clearly articulated need, proof of concept, nice. So you want to demonstrate what we're doing. This is fantastic. Great. I think that's laying a really fantastic basis. I love we're getting so many attending events like this. Oh, I love whoever said that. Thank you. Okay, cool. So thank you guys. I'll go ahead and I think we can go to the next question. We just want to know where everyone's coming from today. So if you can just move to the next question in the poll. For those of you who just joined, the Menti link is in the chat here. And you can just join the Menti link and follow us. The chat, I know from the registrations, we had a lot of folks coming in from Africa. Oh, Morocco, lovely. Kenya, UK. Rwanda, Spain. Oh, nice. Some more Kenyans, awesome. US, okay, fantastic. And Shami, we can go ahead to the next question. I think the next question is, we want to know who's in the room. So let us know what best describes your organization. Are you an entrepreneur? Are you a funder yourself or a donor? Maybe you're an incubator. Maybe you're from an academic institution, or maybe you're a consultant. If you're other, I would love to know what other means. Oh, and I see in the chat some folks from Ghana, which are great. Okay, so a consultant, another membership network organization. Nice, good spread, and quite a few incubators as expected. Oh, other, yeah, management consultant company, if that's Kezia. Fantastic. Okay, so I think we have one more to go, if I'm not wrong. So we want this session to be very practical and applicable for you. So let us know, what are some of the most daunting challenges that you have when it comes to fundraising? So you've shared with us your strategies. What are some of the biggest challenges you experience when it comes to fundraising? Because I think this will give help give some really fantastic context to our speakers. And again, thanks, Tessine has just put the link in. If you've just joined, please click on the Mentimeter link and you can go through the link to share your feedback. No challenges? Nobody has a single challenge when it comes to fundraising? I find that really hard to believe.
Ariel, sorry, I don't think we can type the responses on the Menti.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Okay. All right. So we'll fix that and maybe we'll come back to that a bit later. So maybe after the speakers introduce themselves, I'll come back to that. Thank you. Thank you, Wendy, for flagging that, because yeah, I know there's got to be challenges. So the flow for today is we're going to let Maggie and David introduce themselves and tell us a little bit more about their work. And how they approach funding and what they look for in partners. And then we're going to spend the rest of the time answering questions that you all have, and some of those burning questions that you want to answer. So without any further ado, I will hand it over to Maggie. And Maggie, please, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Ariel. Thank you all for being here. Excited to hear your questions and see what I can offer to add to what is often like the least favorite part of running an incubator. Nobody got into doing this work so that they could fundraise and constantly pitch donors. So not the most glamorous work. And I come from a background of having worked inside of an incubator in the US for about 5 years. And also having worked inside of some startup companies myself as well. So I like to believe that approachable and empathetic in terms of what this challenge is and like what the power dynamics are. So the mission for Lemelson Foundation, we have a pretty unique, we're a private family foundation based in the United States. And our mission is to improve lives through invention. The way that I think about this is we sort of have a worldview that assumes that, where current innovation is taking place inside of multinational corporations or inside of some of the most sophisticated research institutions headquartered, particularly in global north, might not be the best places for innovation to take place that is suited to the needs of the most underserved markets in the world. And so we're really interested in how do we help contribute to cultivating innovation systems that are tied to problems in underserved markets. And so today I manage our work internationally, which is in India and East Africa. And we provide grants, we make investments, we do contracts. We are very flexible in terms of the format of the funding that we provide. The way that we determine priorities, we take a very place-based approach. So when we work in a given country, we start to understand, where is there some density of innovation taking place in some existing capacity, and then take time trying to engage with all the stakeholders that make up any given innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystem. And we have always found that incubators, accelerators, entrepreneur support organizations play a very critical role in those ecosystems. So while we also work with capital providers, we might work with a lot of maker spaces or spaces where one can also access physical infrastructure. We have always worked with some entrepreneur support organizations that are offering business advisory. We have a very unique focus on physical inventions. We think that innovation is really important, that you need business model innovation, you need software innovations to solve some of the greatest social and environmental needs in these markets. But we also think that physical things have a role to play, and that they are also more capital intensive and have these sort of unique challenges that if you aren't very intentional in developing your ecosystem to be inclusive of serving them, then they are often neglected. And so that's why we have this sort of additional focus. So most of the things that we support are broader in their intention, but also somehow maybe customized to consider the needs of commercializing physical hardware, biotech type things. So we are sector agnostic. We don't have any particular themes like energy, health, education that we're focused on. That's not how we measure our outcomes. Every organization that we work with has sort of developed their own thesis for what it is, their sort of North Star in terms of the impact that they want to achieve that is aligned with a sustainable development goal of some kind, and that that has a clarity of like, what is the role of innovation in achieving that goal? So if for them it's about resilient and sustainable agriculture, then that's fine. We're going to dig into that thesis with them to understand how are they enabling innovation toward that end. And we trust them to develop those systems, but then sort of take us along on the journey for exactly how that thesis works. So we really do exclusively work with impact-focused organizations. I'd say that that's something that makes us a little bit unique within the ecosystem of donors that support entrepreneur support organizations, is that we care about economic development, but it's not our ultimate outcome that we're after. So success for us isn't the number of companies that you work with and the jobs that they create and the revenue that they generate and the money that they can raise. Those are good sort of intermediary outcomes that you're good at supporting the growth of companies, but there needs to be clarity in what impact you're hoping to achieve with those companies. So what is it that those companies do? We think that it's possible to more intentionally link entrepreneurship to the sort of social and environmental outcomes that we all want to see in the world. And so we're very, if we're working in healthcare, then it's not just about picking the healthcare companies that are really capable of growth. It's about how are those healthcare companies related to increasing quality, affordability, accessibility of healthcare. And what are those outcomes that you're going to be holding your organization accountable for? Is it reducing maternal and neonatal mortality? Is it, whatever it is, walk me through how you'll achieve that and how that is integrated to your selection, the network that you're developing. So a lot of our partners that are incubators, they're also partnering with nonprofit organizations that are deeply focused on some of these underserved needs in markets. And I think that also enables them to make an innovation system that's more in touch with some of these social and environmental problems. And it makes them better at supporting companies. So let's see, what do we look for in partners? So I spoke a little bit about that in terms of this like dedication to impact outcomes. But also I would say we tend to work with partners that again are really kind of systems thinkers by nature. So they tend not to be satisfied with the collective performance of their portfolio, but really consider their role inside of strengthening an ecosystem. And that can be both the ecosystem that's connected to that impact outcome. And, as they think about, they do often have a goal around economic development and how these companies are able to progress through stages of development. So they're very cognizant of like, what are the barriers that these companies seem to face when going to market? And how can I create some kind of step change in reducing those barriers, not just for my portfolio, but maybe for all companies in this market. So that might be interacting with a regulatory agency in their country to change certain regulations that are hindering at least the pace, if not the even commercialization and entry into market. And then I would say it is for us really, we really do work with organizations that even if they haven't matured enough to be playing that kind of role, a lot of the ESOs that we have partnered with, we've been some of their first funding in. A lot of the times, we're willing to invest in teams that are still building their organization, and we're willing to invest in their developing that capacity, often over, multi-year period, because it takes time to grow an organization. We're willing to do that if we can tell that this is a team of people that have very clearly outlined like what their thesis is for how their organization is going to have these impacts that we care about, and we're aligned in terms of what the gaps in this ecosystem are, and that they have like a clear thesis, even if it's not yet demonstrated, but they have an idea of how exactly they're going to address some of those gaps. Then for us, it's as much about the learning that can come from supporting them through that, to learn about, is that an effective approach or not? And so a lot of the times we will structure grants as learning questions. We have a learning agenda, and if we can answer these questions at the end of the grant, we'll feel good about it. And so I'd say the counterpoint to this, because I'm making Lemelson sound like this incredibly flexible and wonderful funder, the reality is that supporting organizations this way is really expensive. So we're often working with organizations for long periods of time with large grants, and it means we can only work with a few at a time. And so my greatest sort of weak point is that you can't do this with a lot of organizations at once. And so we have just a few incubator partners, and then we're also making grants that are surrounding those incubators to achieve the goals that we have inside of their ecosystem. So that will be investments, and it will be grants to organizations that are not entrepreneur support organizations, but that we think can play a role in addressing gaps. So I'll stop there and rely on Ariel to let me know if I've forgotten any of the key questions. But look forward to the discussion.
No, thanks, Maggie. I think that was a really great overview, and you are a wonderful funder. So I I hope you can work with more organizations in the future as well. I'll give the floor now to David to just give us a little bit of overview about Johnson & Johnson Impact Ventures and the work that you all are doing, what you look for in partners, how you identify them, and work with them moving forward. So David, over to you.
Thanks, Ariel, and hi, everybody. So David Higgins is my name, from Johnson & Johnson Impact Ventures. So JJIV is an impact investor, and we were established back in 2019 with a $50 million impact investment fund that sits within the Johnson & Johnson Foundation. And JJIV was initiated to address two key challenges. One was the funding for SDG 3, which is the challenges around provision of a universal good health and well-being. And I mean, that is still chronically underfunded, and the evidence still shows that there's a long way to go. And the rationale really behind the work that we did was, with J&J having a very long legacy of being a grant provider, that grant-based model really going to be able to by themselves reach the gaps that was able to scale much faster and also be recycled. Was something that was likely to be very attractive. So that was one of the reasons. And then, I mean, the other reason really was to support the crucial role of healthcare entrepreneurs in developing markets. And that can never be underestimated. There is still a shortage of supply of funding to healthcare entrepreneurs in developing markets. Thankfully, the total amount of impact investment dollars that have now been generated globally grows and grows. But the healthcare space still remains a tiny piece of that for a variety of reasons. And I'm why we do it this way. I mean, the ultimate challenge, I suppose, is ultimately that we want to see impact by not only recycling financial returns, but delivering impact alongside. We focus on companies and entrepreneurs that innovate to improve global health equity. So we are, because we're J&J, we are focused exclusively on healthcare. And the idea behind what we do, what we look for really are organizations that enable the acceleration of access to quality and affordable healthcare for underserved patient populations. So our approach is to target early stage companies. They're typically around Series A, but the fund does have some level of flexibility in terms of its investment approach, and can look at both equity and debt sort of structures. And we invest selectively sometimes also in impact funds. And we're about 50% down through the deployment of our 50 million fund. That's into 16 investments, which are across 5 continents. And the investments that we've placed our bets on range from a variety of healthcare subsectors and business models. They include medtech, diagnostics, health tech, digital platforms, systems, supply chain, and clinical services and care delivery. We are lucky enough to be able to leverage a very wide network across J&J to bring additional expertise and additionality to the investments that we make. And obviously that allows us then to use that expertise to provide support and resources to companies beyond the initial dollar. I often tend to view it that the easy part is the provision of the investment dollars. The challenging part really is the bit that kind of comes after that. That can be provided through a variety of solutions to the companies that sit within our portfolio. I will say that in addition to the portfolio companies, we also support other mission-aligned entrepreneurs and founders in the broader ecosystem for healthcare impact through external partnerships, grant funding, and accelerator programs, fellowships, and also in venture competitions. So we are kind of broad in terms of what we do. We are first and foremost an impact investor, but we are trying to prove and still trying to prove that kind of fundamental thesis that impact investment in the healthcare space is possible. And I think there are probably a number of years likely to pass before we can get to a point where we feel comfortable with that. But the evidence is there that things are going the right direction. There is clearly an increased number of stakeholders and other partners who are co-investing with us. We've been lucky enough to partner with a number of other players and helping us to broaden out the ecosystem, accelerators and others. I would think probably to my sense, I mean, I echo what Maggie said, and that was such wisdom in those sort of comments. I mean, for us, the wish is always a simple one, is the ambition to find somebody who is mission aligned with the work that we do. It makes perfect sense in terms of trying to find the partners that we would like to sort of work with kind of going forward. And I think one of the challenges with impact investing in healthcare is the challenges that result are there because of the infrastructure or the lack of infrastructure within that sort of space. And I mean, that's really where I see the more relevant partners for us as we move forward are the ones who can see that, who are also then looking at ways and means to tackle those specific kind of challenges. And I mean, that is a very difficult thing to do, but there are, I mean, I think we've been lucky enough to find some partners historically who've been able to help us on that journey. But I would sort of see as we move forward, the partners that we would work with the ones that would be very much mission aligned, but also very aware of those sort of challenges within the infrastructural ecosystem that we try to work with in healthcare, and are actually trying to help us to resolve and meet those sort of challenges.
Fantastic, David. Thank you so much. So I just wanted to say that, you know, we are open to take questions from the audience, so please drop them in the chat. I do want to go back to our Mentimeter poll that I think we got fixed now before we open for Q&A. So yeah, let us know what's the most challenging thing for you when it comes to fundraising, and please let us know if it's not working for some reason, but really keen to get this up. I think while we wait for some of these responses, I think we'll get we'll get started with some of the questions that we have coming in. And I think I saw, actually, we had Sama Irene from Cameroon put a question in when she was registering. And I think, Sama, I saw you join. And I think this speaks to, you know, making connections virtually. I think that's a very, very good challenge. I mean, very, very accurate challenge for many of us. And I think this resonates actually with both of these and how to best invest time and energy. You know, what are some good tactics for, you know, how do I build good relationships with funders? I think especially in a virtual world, right? I think that, you know, with COVID, the world has become smaller, but it's also actually become somehow harder to connect and build, right? We saw someone talking about trust and building empathy. How do you, you know, what are some good tactics on how to build those very personal, you know, relationships with funders? Or maybe that's not a good tactic, but yeah, I don't know. Either of you who want to respond to that.
I mean, I'm happy to sort of kick that one off. It's working in the virtual world has many benefits, but it has so many challenges. And one of those biggest challenges as an investor is the difficulty with being able to conclude whatever type of transaction that is, whether that's kind of funding an accelerator partner, or meeting new accelerator partners, or having pipeline and whatever. So, I mean, that is undoubtedly one of the difficulties. I would say, though, that even in this sort of virtual space, there are, I think, within healthcare, or even in the broader sort of sense, I think there tend to be certain kind of touch points that kind of make sort of sense. So, for example, from my perspective, I attend the SANCALP conference every year. It's at the beginning of the year. It nearly is a time where I can come away with a roadmap for the rest of my year, and that's a conference I'm sure many of you have attended in the past, where it's all about kind of making connections, which are really essential in this day and age. I mean, other than that, in the context of dealing with sort of things virtually, I look at the way we work within J&J. I mean, most of the approaches that we get are online through emails. They could be recommendations. Recommendation, obviously, from somebody who works closest with us will always help in terms of bringing visibility kind of closer to the surface. But I think, you know, as I say, I think it's kind of it's where's the ability to kind of make some kind of clear sense of something being completely mission aligned and relevant to the work that we're specifically doing. I mean, if you think of what we're trying to do in the context of what I outlined at the top, what we're looking for really are partners who can help us deliver on those sort of things. So where you can find some sort of a hook that suggests that the work that you're able to do is relevant, or some specific initiative that you're looking at, which is, as you believe, something new. I mean, things like that. I mean, it's a sales tool, I guess, and the organizations obviously got to be very aware of how to kind of bring those sort of things to the surface in the communications with sort of funders. I think, you know, it is hard, but it does work.
Yeah, maybe I'll Ariel, I'll just build off of what David was saying.
Yeah, please do.
I think oftentimes it's the very in terms of where to spend time and energy. I know this is really hard, but I do find like what's most influential for me, whether somebody has reached out to me or I've come across the organization more organically, if it's clear in, you know, in their online footprint that this is somebody who spends time trying to, that is like very dedicated to solving problems that are really bigger than their organization, that comes like, you can see that in blog posts or in the way that they might be participating in research, or in, you know, they really are engaged in their mission, beyond just the promotion of their organization, but really like a dedication to solving some problems that that generally like that is intriguing, and I recognize in that team people that we're going to learn a lot from. And so that is always something that makes me, this is somebody I should probably, even if it's not a funding relationship, at least spend some time with, because I'm going to learn something. So that often, in terms of where to spend time and energy, particularly if you're finding that your mission and approach doesn't resonate with like the current paradigms in the funder world, where it's like, man, this is not hitting home, then sometimes it's sort of like building the case a little bit for some of the approaches being used, because it takes us a while as funders to figure out what we might be doing wrong. And I think that's one way to shift paradigms and really compel funders, is to, by trying to do some of that work, and there is a bit of a value in some of that advocacy.
That's fantastic, Maggie. Thank you. And I see V Gangi's question here, and we will go ahead and share any links post this session. But Maggie and David, if there are if you want to touch on how you accept proposals, maybe just briefly, are they, do you accept unsolicited proposals? Are there links that you want to put in the chat? That would be great. So maybe I'll let you guys both just touch quickly on that.
Yeah, I'll go grab the link there's a page on our website. We don't accept unsolicited proposals, but this is a place where you can put in like an inquiry form with just a little bit about your organization. And if it's clear that there is some alignment, you'll hear back from somebody, but that doesn't get elevated to me unless it's very clear, like, oh, this is aligned with our mission. And then I'll receive that and be able to review it. And that has been the start of some conversations. I will warn that, like, we get to know teams for quite some time before we engage in any kind of funding relationships, though. And then, I'd say also, reaching out to Pollinate Impact if you're like, we think that we should be in touch with Maggie, then reach out and they can always introduce you as well.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think probably we have a JJIV website, which has the option to forward proposals. It's obviously typically designed for submissions for direct investment in sort of startups and things like that. But I would suggest probably if anyone wanted to have any further conversations, other than that, perhaps maybe the best thing to do would be to channel it through Pollinate Impact, and happy to look at those for sure.
Fantastic, thank you. And I'm going to come to Jessica's question in a minute. We had one more that came through during the registration, and I think it's always good to learn from failure. So if you have any good stories of, what are things that we should not do when soliciting funders? So what are some of the worst things that you've seen that you think should never be repeated? What are some things that the folks in the room should not do when looking for funders? Anonymized, of course.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of thinking of what the answer to that question is in the broadest sort of sense of what tends to. I'm just sort of thinking in terms of the kind of things that would make a proposal less likely to be successful when I screen it, irrespective of whether it's coming from an accelerator or from a startup or whatever. The first one would typically be where the team, or however it happens to be, is presenting. It does not seem to have mastery of the content of the submission. Certainly, and that's often evident when you kind of challenge back maybe with some of the more basic kind of questions, and there doesn't seem to be the ability to kind of really kind of deal with those sort of questions. There's always going to be submissions that are not mission aligned with the work that we do, or don't fit within the specific impact criteria or investment criteria. Those criteria are set on our website, so that will obviously be something that would lead to a decline. But I mean, for me, it's always useful to get some form of a pitch deck. It's never necessary to have a pitch deck that goes into rigorous and huge amounts of detail, because that's really unnecessary. It should obviously be at a very sort of summary level, kind of touching on the right kind of points. But I mean, fundamentally for me, with any kind of a prospect, it really comes down to the people behind the organization, the founders, the team, and trying to kind of gauge the capabilities and strengths of those. And so more often than not, it's down to the sort of soft side of the conversation, that piece of the conversation that happened before, during, and after, when we're not specifically talking about the content of whatever the specific proposal might be. All of those sort of things tend to kind of combine together to get some sort of sense of how you're looking at things, and what you're identifying as the elements that you might want to screen things out on.
Great,
Yeah,
thanks.
I would just add, you know, engaging with something like a growth mindset, in terms of, like, you know, I wouldn't ask anybody to you know, compromise on their vision and mission, but I think what's been most successful is when we're working with organizations where we can tell that the leadership is also curious and engaged, and demonstrates sort of like the ability to learn and pivot as they go is pretty important to us. And so similar to what David was describing in terms of those softer elements of a team, I think that is pretty important to us. So sort of some of the same things that I imagine many of you look for when screening and selecting the enterprises that you work with, it's a lot of those same things. And absolutely, like, that's the background that I have working in an incubator is exactly what is useful as a funder in terms of, like, understanding a team and their strategy. So very much like the same things that you are probably exercising in your selection of portfolio companies.
Great, thanks so much. And I think it's really important, I think, to recognize that it's, you know, there's more to it than just what's in the pitch deck, right? That there's so much behind it around the motivations of the team, and sort of that alignment with the team, that are so important. So I'll come to Jessica's question, and she said, I would love to hear more about how you as funders think about supporting the organizational capacity and sustainability, i.e. leadership, people, culture, governance of your impact ventures or ESO partners. I think that's a really great question, especially because we need good people to deliver the work, and there's often a lot of needs around developing those capabilities internally.
Yeah, happy to respond to that one. First of all, I mean, that is such an important element in the work, and I know from a J&J perspective, we have put a lot of time into really understanding how we can provide the right kind of support to the portfolio of companies that we invest in, and to where it's possible to look at some of the other organizations that we're in our ecosystem. But it is a challenging area, because what I certainly have found in the couple of years that I've been doing this sort of work is, you get big corporates like J&J and others, and you provide funding to sort of startups, and then very soon afterwards, I think all corporates are guilty of this, they talk about this kind of employee engagement sort of element as an add-on, and they ask sort of the organizations, the startups, you know, for, okay, we would like to have some of our employees go and do this, and this. And I think a lot of startups tend to feel obligated to engage with these sort of programs, and a lot of the time I think they may have some sort of limited value, when they're done on that basis. So to my mind, and somebody touched on this in one of your earlier questions, Ariel, there's this element of trust, which is, it's nearly the, you develop some level of trust with the organizations you're investing in. Once you've invested, you need to augment that level of trust to a point where you have very candid conversations about things like that. And we're talking about here, where the founder or whoever it happens to be can turn around and say, okay, that is not what I need, or that is not what I want to work, or this is something that I don't need for a specific point of time. But when you get beyond that and you have real meaningful conversations, you get to a point, I think, where you can really figure out. And I mean, J&J is a huge company with a large network of employees, who's many of whom are very keen and willing and qualified to provide support. So we would provide a range of employee engagement opportunities to employees within J&J to support the network of organizations that we invest in. We have had, I think, some decent level of success, I think, with the initiatives that we sort of sponsored over the last number of years, and we continue to kind of figure out how to kind of move that kind of as we kind of go forward. But I think fundamentally it comes down to this idea of kind of trust in the relationship with the partners, wherever they may be, so that you can kind of figure things out in a meaningful fashion.
Great.
Yeah.
Maggie, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, we have more work to do on this, to be honest, and it is a topic of discussion inside of our organization. It's like, what else could we do that would be more systematic? Because I think we're guilty of being fairly opportunistic and you know, we do a lot of one-off kind of support. So I think we're good at supporting communications. We have an internal communications team. Organizations that are not that don't have that yet, we'll spend time with them and try to support them. We'll kind of write them into like our budget for next year and our communications planning. We absolutely, you know, it's bandwidth limited, but like how can we help with connections, introductions that are useful, that are part of our network? Sometimes those are just peer organizations that people want to learn from. So trying to help our network connect effectively. But then beyond that, I think we've had, you know, in terms of those opportunistic engagements, there have been times when we're working with an organization where we say, okay, we think you're doing a great job, but there is still some capacity that seems to be missing, and that like you need to prepare your organization for sort of the next stage of growth. And we have engaged consulting firms to sort of do like an audit of like what would it look like where are your risks and your assets, and sort of do the more traditional like SWOT analysis on the organization as it prepares for that next phase. And those can be, you know, like fairly robust contracts, like a few months of these firms coming in. And there are instances where that has been incredibly well received, extremely transformational and like successful for the organization. And there are instances where that has felt like maybe our level of trust wasn't there with the organization yet. And it has been a failure where they have felt like, oof, this is like Big Brother telling me what I need to do. And it's not done with that intentionality at all. It's very much like this should be something that is, okay, an opportunity to say, okay, wow, we really need to up our financial systems, and our governance is not as strong where it should be. Or, you know, it should be like opportunity for growth. And I've seen it go both ways. And I've actually backed off of it as a result, because it's like, oof, this is something we need to be really careful about how we introduce it, so that it doesn't erode the trust that we're working to build. So I'd say that's something that like we're still trying to figure out. Okay, maybe it's not, it doesn't start with that kind of external analysis without clarity of exactly how we're willing to support the findings from something like that, so that it's done differently, so that it's very clear that we are trying to support them through whatever comes from this.
Thanks, Maggie. And I see I'm not sure if I'm going to say it right, but Majda is sort of, I think, trying to dig deeper on, again, how to build relationships. So we heard, from David, yes, attending certain conferences that give the opportunity to meet in person. I know, Maggie, you talked about really sort of the thought leadership and visibility piece. When we started this session, we asked what organizations are already doing, and some of them talked about impact reports and sending newsletters and getting visibility that way. Are there, what other sort of practical approaches, can people take to, to build that relationship? And does it, does the visibility help, in terms of newsletters and reports and things, or is it more a personal relationship that folks need to be targeting?
I would say that it's probably all of those things. I mean, the challenges and the question that you were being asked, Ariel, is pretty much the sort of same question that we have in terms of trying to find pipeline. So I mean, it's always how does one find pipeline? I mean, I'm going to a team meeting in 2 weeks' time when the first topic on the agenda is exactly that. And we're kind of going to have, it's the ongoing thing. How does somebody find pipelines? So how does the group on this call find these kind of introduction to funders? How do they make that sort of connection? I mean, I don't think there's any kind of holy grail for a way to do it. So it's a combination of calls like this. It's a combination of attending conferences. It's a question of being kind of opportunistic. It's a question of doing all the things that are outlined. And at that point, then something kind of resonates. And kind of makes things move on to that sort of next stage. So, what but the reality really is, it's just a case of getting some level of visibility in the eyes of those who are making decisions, and that's a very easy thing to say and a very difficult thing to do, because it's a challenging thing to try and figure that out. So that could be a case of knowing somebody who knows somebody and makes and provides an introduction, or maybe having some level of relationship with a company that's come through one of our other partners, or where we have an investment in, or who knows what it may be. So I think it's a case of just always being alert to the possibility of an opportunity to have some form of an engagement. Is undoubtedly the best way to do it. And I would say, I mean, from a J&J perspective, we Maggie and Lemelson are obviously way more thoughtful about and involved in supporting the incubators and accelerator network, but we do to a certain extent within J&J, and are always looking for new ways to figure things out. And I would say that my own sort of sense of the way that sort of space works is that sort of startups, obviously one of the main thing that they're short of is money. The main way that they access that money is through kind of accelerators that are sponsored by organizations and companies such as J&J. And they do that. And I mean, when we did our first one, I had some sense that, oh, J&J, aren't we great? We did this accelerator and we gave somebody whatever the amount of money was. And then you have a conversation with somebody from another corporate and you find that they've done exactly the same thing. And then you find that all of the startups are going around, and it's the way they obviously get funding for those sort of early years. And it makes perfect sense. So I'm kind of at a point now where what I'm trying to say is, okay, how do we move forward in a way that's a little bit sort of different from what's happened in the past, and not just kind of look at a world where we're partnering with an accelerator program that's very much kind of like-minded and similar to the kind of things that have been done in the past. Something that really is thoughtful about some of the challenges that we sort of face, but is doing something that's a little bit different and more likely to resonate and be supportive of entrepreneurs. It would definitely be something that would be very relevant to me.
Yeah, well put. And I think the only thing I would add is the newsletters and the impact reports. Those are helpful in that they tell me where your North Star is. Like you're measuring what matters most to you as an organization, and so that's informative from that regard. And I guess that there are other funding sources that probably care more about, like, okay, you've got some quantified track record. That's less important to us. But I'd say the most powerful thing for me, and what makes me prioritize building a relationship, which is probably the most critical thing, but how do you even get there, is a recommendation or endorsement or positive comment from a peer or another organization that is working within the same region or in the same sector. That, like, if there's an introduction that is made by by one of our existing partners, or that just says, oh yeah, they do really good work, even if it's in, you know, a different sector or a slightly different geography that they've come across, you know, and to David's point, like, sometimes it is there. Many companies do work with multiple ESOs. Sometimes that's not a bad thing. Sometimes, like, there are complementary things one can access through different programs. But what's most compelling is when the other incubators also respect that and say, wow, that, you know, yeah, actually, like, our company, like this company that we work with also worked with them and like benefited. That's really powerful. And so that's, I'd say, like, the strongest endorsement is when some of our local partners say, like, oh yeah, I've heard of them, and we do ask. So I'd say that's critical.
Fantastic. So yeah, those peer recommendations. And again, I think a lot of it comes down to building that social capital, and who do you know who could make the introduction, like David said, or who can make that endorsement, like Maggie mentioned. I think this had come up in the poll before we started this, around, you know, building a track record. And Maggie, you touched on this, you know, that maybe for you the track record is less important, but if an organization is small, how can they attract that funding, even if they have a limited track record? What recommendations would you have for those organizations?
Yeah, my first piece of advice is always, like, know your landscape. So you don't have a track record yet, but you have a hypothesis about how you're going to be additional in the region or the sector that you're trying to work in. So a very clear and compelling, you know, case for why your organization is needed, relative to what already exists, is probably the most important thing for me to see and to understand. And if that is, like, a really strong and logical, and it might be based on existing data of the need and the gap that you aim to fill, and sort of the approach that you plan to take, and how you would actually measure that in the future, even if you haven't had the funding to go and do that yet, is what is most important to me. Because if that's a really, that gap resonates, and and it's clear that you understand the landscape that you're operating within, then to me that's something that might be worth testing.
David, do you want to make any comment on that?
I think probably primarily I'd have to say, I would like to echo what Maggie said. I mean, Maggie, I think, is when Lemelson is undoubtedly more focused on those specific sort of situations. I mean, one of the challenges within the big kind of corporate world really is trying to move beyond the hurdle of some level of criteria, one of which is sort of track record, whether you're either looking at an investment and stuff like that. So I mean, I see where we sit. I mean, the health impact investing is risky. Pre-Series A and Series A is a risky time, but it's not the most risky. So I mean, I would say the similar thing in terms of looking at sort of accelerator partners. You know, I would think that you know, I suppose it depends on what we mean by a track record. So that track record may not be evident in the specific organization that individual may be with, but that there should be some evidence of a track record that's in the sort of the previous experience by a number of people who've involved in the organization, that gives you some level of comfort, and would obviously act as an opener for a kind of conversation with the new partner.
All right, fantastic. And I think we have time for maybe one last quick question. and I think we picked up on this when we were asking about the challenges also. A lot of, especially ESOs and incubators tend to, they respond to RFPs and EOIs, and it's really very tiring, and they don't always align with the work. So the question really is, how can we get more funding that's less restrictive and more flexible? And maybe part of that is really knowing who you're approaching and knowing who's out there. But any thoughts on that? How to access the funding that organizations need to be flexible to do what they need to do?
Yeah, I mean, I would start with, like, I think there should be more of that funding in the system. And it is really hard to come by. So just I empathize as much as anything. I do think that there's more advocacy for that happening every day. Ariel, I know you and I have discussed Argidius's report that they've put out, saying, like, this is also a more effective way to support entrepreneur support organizations. So if you haven't seen that, go to Argidius's website. You can start using that. Start making that visible. But actually accessing that, I think the organizations that do provide that kind of funding, I do think that they lean toward a relationship based funding, so that you do need to work on developing those relationships. It's a much less transactional way of supporting organizations. So it's not going to be the funders that are putting out large RFPs. It's going to be donors that you develop relationships with, and they do sort of act differently. I wish I had more advice for that, but it's the reality is that there should be more of that kind of funding, and there's not.
Yeah,
Thanks,
I'm very little to add to that. I mean, just to sort of, all I could do is really kind of comment from a J&J perspective, and I would say that we are not expert in the kind of work that our ESO partners would engage in. And so I would like to think that when we start a relationship which is based on trust, that we leave it up to the partner really to kind of frame out an awful lot of the engagement. In terms of, what we may have a kind of a top level sort of structure around how that program might work, the partner is left to their own ends to kind of figure out the way forward to kind of deliver on the purpose and to realize the sort of specific ambition of the program, and to deal with whatever dynamic elements pop up along the way, as they always do. But I can't comment as to how other funders could have approached that, but I think that, to my mind, that just seems to be the most sensible way to do it.
Yeah. And I mean, we're at the top of the hour, so I wish we had more time. But I think what has been very clear, is the need to build relationships, the need to build trust, and to build social capital to be able to do that, right? I think you can't just rely on the RFPs and the proposals, but go out to events, attend sessions like these, build your networks to be able to build those personal relationships with folks. We're going to do one last thing before we sign off. If you've been to any of our sessions before, you know what's coming. So I'm going to ask everyone to turn their videos on so I can see your beautiful faces. And thanks, Jessica, Zach. Come on, we have a lot of people here. There we go. Turn them on. Okay, so we're going to do what we call, oh, hi, Maya. Good to see you, Jefferson. So we're going to do what we call a surprise photo. So everyone's going to cover their eyes, and then I'm going to count to 3, and you're going to make a wonderful surprise face. And apologies to Majda, who looks like she's in a public place. People are going to look at you funny, but it's all great. So go ahead and cover your eyes, no peeking. Let me see. Is everybody covered? Okay, I'm going to count to 3. 1, 2, 3, and surprise. Awesome. Thank you guys for joining. Thank you so much, David and Maggie, for answering all of our questions. I think you really shed a lot of light for a lot of us. And our next session for funders is coming up in December, and I see Zach. Zach, hi. I think Zach is up on our next one. He's with Triple Jump, and we'll have some incubators pitching in early December. If you want to learn more about Pollinate Impact, we are always looking for common pollinators to help build the impact incubation industry. So you can go to pollinateimpact.org to learn more. And thank you all so much. Thank you for joining. Thank you, David and Maggie. And I hope to see all of you again at next sessions in the future, and hope to see some membership coming from this too. So thanks so much, and enjoy the rest of your morning, evening, day, wherever you are. Thanks, everyone.